The iPhone no longer has the most powerful chip inside a phone anymore. The Snapdragon 8 Elite is actually beating the A18 Pro in many of our testing parameters. So allow me to present the evidence in this video where I compare the Snapdragon 8 Elite inside the iQOO 13 against the A18 Pro inside the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Hi, if you're watching me for the first time, I'm Ershad. You're watching Trakin Tech English, your destination for detailed, incisive gadget reviews. Now, I'm not going into the detailed breakdown of the architecture of each of these chipsets. It is there on your screen right now, so you can pause and take a look at it. But the one thing that you need to note is that the prime core on the Snapdragon 8 Elite is extremely powerful. Also, you know what? One thing I must remind you is that the 8 Elite is inside a phone which is nearly 1/3 the price of the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Alright, now I'll get on with the benchmark numbers, which is what we're all waiting for. But before I talk about it, let me tell you that both of these phones were tested in a controlled environment at 24 degrees Celsius. Now, when we ran Geekbench 6, the 8 Elite actually scores much higher than the A18 Pro in multi-core scores. It is very close to touching 10,000 points, which is crazy. However, the single-core score of the A18 Pro is definitely better than the 8 Elite even now. Also, for the very first time, we ran the Browser Bench Speedometer 3.0 test. Now, this test basically simulates web-based applications and tries to find out how chips perform in this test. And here the iPhone 16 Pro Max beat the iQOO 13 fair and square. But where the Snapdragon 8 Elite inside the iQOO 13 beats the iPhone 16 Pro Max fair and square is in network performance. It is seriously a time for Apple to build their very own 5G modem, because even right now, I think they're lagging behind in 5G performance, at least in India. Now, we use the GeoSIM on both these phones because it's the most popular network in India. And in both the download speeds and upload speeds, the iQOO 13 is easily beating the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Now, to start off with the gaming benchmarks, the first thing that we ran on these phones is the 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme Stress Test. And the GPU stability of the iQOO 13 was actually lower than that of the iPhone 16 Pro Max. But there is something that you need to note closely. Take a look at the best loop score. The 8 Elite's best loop score is higher. Now scroll down a little bit more and take a look at the average FPS, and you will notice that again, the 8 Elite is higher than the 18 Pro. In fact, we also tested the ray tracing performance in the Solar Bay ray tracing test, and again, the iQOO 13 with the Snapdragon 8 Elite performs better than the iPhone 16 Pro Max. In fact, on the iPhone, we got anywhere between 18 to 40 FPS while we ran the test, whereas on the iQOO 13, it was 25 to 56. And we also ran the GFX Bench Aztec Ruins benchmark, and the iQOO 13 actually wiped the floor with the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Just take a look at the total frames and what the iQOO 13 achieved compared to the iPhone 16 Pro Max, and now take a look at the FPS number. Yeah, it's more than double in both the cases, which is clearly indicating that the GPU on the 8 Elite is way more powerful than the GPU on the 18 Pro. But we did not stop there. Of course, we ran our real-world Genshin Impact test. Now, here's a disclaimer that we need to make, is that the iPhone actually supports 120 FPS natively, whereas on the iQOO 13, you get support for 60 FPS. But in the tool that we use to get FPS data for the iPhone, we could only get it up to 60 FPS. So we tested out 60 FPS parity between the two. Now, the iPhone 16 Pro Max had a stable, close to 60 FPS when you were playing the game. And on the iQOO 13, it was about 59.5, which is, in the ballpark range of each other. But the most important thing to note here is that the iQOO 13 actually stayed cooler than the iPhone 16 Pro Max. The iPhone touched 40 degrees, which is not too bad, but this is so much cooler at around 35 degrees. And these temperature differences do matter in real world performance. So if you're taking the camera out, then the iPhone is the first one that gets hotter compared to the iQOO 13. And while the iPhone does have a lot of AAA game titles right now, which is definitely the advantage that it has at the moment, I think if those AAA games were to run on the iQOO 13, they would run better than the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Also, with Android phones like the iQOO 13, you have gaming specific features like game frame interpolation, where you can actually insert frames, and from 60 FPS you can take it to 120 FPS as well, which is nice, which you of course cannot do on the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Now, after doing these tests, we can conclude that both the A18 Pro inside the iPhone 16 Pro Max and the Snapdragon 8 Elite inside the iQOO 13 are very powerful chips. So the iPhone excels in stability and in single core performance, but the 8 Elite inside the iQOO 13 pushes the boundaries of performance, especially with multi-core performance and in gaming. And in our parameter, when it comes to raw performance and raw power, the Snapdragon 8 Elite is definitely more powerful than the A18 Pro this year. The iPhone used to have a 2-year lead when it comes to performance. Not anymore. Definitely not anymore. What are your thoughts on this? Let me know in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, keep tracking and stay safe.